So we have a interesting blog post by Bryan Caplan. I think he's right on the money about local governments. Basically, he says, "You had two jobs. I've been long critical of local government. Yes, the local officials are closer to the people, and yes, moving to a new town is a lot cheaper than moving to a new state or a new country. Yet, local governments are still far inferior to for-profit business. Recently, however, I realized that I've been too generous. Two main things that local governments do are: one, provide K through 12 education; two, regulate construction. I would also say policing, but he doesn't go into that. And on reflection, local governments do both of these things terribly. Consider one, voucher systems are clearly more efficient, yet virtually every locality continues to directly supply K through 12 education, nor is this a product of rising state and federal involvement. America's local governments have been funding systems, not students, for centuries. What I would say was about the local governments is, well, of course, it's more about it's a work program for adults. It's not about children education, because that's just like a secondary byproduct. And also, it's a way to fund the unions so they can to fund the Democratic Party and win elections. They're not really. Otherwise, the most obvious thing would be just to voucherize the whole thing and have all sorts of different schools, have parents have a plethora of choices. And tertiary, I think it's also for indoctrination. If you have, independent schools, then they can have a more variety of the things that teach, and the parents can send their kids to a school where more reflects their values, or have a more independent curriculum. Where here is, think like progressives. This is a goal. The progressive wants to indoctrinate, brainwash, have people quote unquote get get the proper education that they feel like is every productive citizen needs, or every democratic voter needs, progressive voters. So they want to indoctrinate to kill children. That's why I think they're very fearful of letting parents choose their own school, because everybody must have the same indoctrination. Okay. And two, local governments construction regulations usually quite strict, especially in the most desirable locations. The resulting draconian system of height limits, zoning, minimum lot sizes, minimum parking requirements, and beyond roughly double the cost of housing, and greatly retard national economic growth. While state and federal government also regulate construction, local regulations are clearly vastly more important. That's why we call them not in my backyard policies. Some economists try to rationalize the status quo, but to no avail. One, voucher systems' effect on test scores is debatable. The effect on customer satisfaction is not. How so? Because if you let parents take their money elsewhere, plenty will. Hence, they are not currently satisfied customers. You could deny that customer satisfaction is a good benchmark, but that's how the standard we use for almost every other business. Why should education be any different? Well, just like I talk about, it's because they want everybody to get the same indoctrination. Two, it also fund the Democratic Party and fund the unions. And two, while you could argue that housing regulation curtail negative externalities, the leading examples are parking and traffic. The optimal response to both is not construction and regs, but peak load pricing. In any case, the damage of housing regulations vastly outweighs the harm of any negative externalities that plausibly prevents. And what will all about the positive externalities of construction? More homes mean more playmates for my kids. Well, the housing thing, it's the NIMBY movement is definitely, they just want to keep poor. They want to keep away high density apartments, because the more apartment units you have, the more chance for poor quote unquote riffraff moving in. So they use code words as far as neighborhood character, or tall buildings casting shadows. And I mean, that is true. I mean, more construction would lower housing prices, but at the same time, it would increase crime or the type of undesirables that these people are so afraid of. So, they're the NIMBY movement is a lot more selfish. They want to preserve what they have. Another route to concede is inefficiencies, but insist that local government still works. After all, local governments are supposed to maximize the interest of their own citizens, and that's what they do, right? Or at least the housing regulation, it's superficially plausible. Existing property owners benefit if you restrict supply, keep housing prices high. Sounds right. Yet on reflection, this slogan is far less clear than it sounds. Most obviously, if housing prices in your region are high and all other localities are strictly regulated housing, deregulation allows your locality to sell out to the developers and earn massive profits. Local regulation is like violating your OPEC quota. In the absence of strident regulation, it's practically a license to print money. How, though, can local governments be so dysfunctional? First, I've argued before, non-profit competition is weaker than for-profit competition, even if the number of competitors is vast. Why? Because no one's trying hard to win. So it would be interesting. Is it possible that we can incentivize politicians to be like CEOs? Can we develop a system that if the economy grows in the local area, if people are moving in, property values are going up, then the local politicians will get a pay raise or some kind of bonuses? If that's if there's a clear incentive to do that, then as far as now is just if everything goes down to the shitter, the politician, yes, he might get kicked out of office or approval rating go down, but if he has a certain constituency, then his office probably is safe. I think, but he doesn't benefit financially. His salary doesn't go up or down based upon these metrics. So, yeah, we need a change there. Tie about implicity assumes that non-profit competition works the same way as for-profit competition. It doesn't. If a business owner figures out how to produce the same good at a lower cost, he pockets all the savings. If the CEO of a publicly held corporation figures out how to produce the same good at a lower cost, he pockets a lot of the savings. But if the mayor of a city figures out how to deliver the same government services for lower taxes, he pockets none of the savings. That's how non-profit work. With the non-profit incentives, neither the number of local governments nor the ease of exit lead to anything resembling perfectly competitive results. The quote-unquote competitors simply have little incentive to do a good job, so they attempt to perform poorly. Second, voters are deeply irrational, even at the local level. Most people chattily refuse to grant that allowing more construction will reliably make housing more affordable. I've argued with people online. That's true. People are pretty stupid. Yes. Because the people. Oh my God! Some of these NIMBY people, man. They're so economically illiterate. They think that if a developer or somebody that actually builds a house makes a profit for doing so, that means all of the benefit goes to them, while everybody else suffers, which is pretty retarded in the first place. It's awful logic. Yes, if you can point to my myth of the rational voter and object, how can voters be so rational even though they expect the cost of voter irrationality is especially high at the local level? Reply, even at the local level, the probability of voter decisiveness is so low that the expected cost of the voter rationality is approximate zero. If you have more than 100 voters, your vote doesn't count. Basically correct. To reiterate, I'm not arguing that local governments have two little blind spots. I'm arguing local governments have two main jobs, and they're both awful. Yeah, that's true. His book is the myth of the rational voter. Basically, to summarize, states that the voters are rationally ignorant because they know deep down inside, well, they have certain emotions, and it emotionally feels good to vote for a certain thing that sounds good, but at the same time, they know their vote doesn't really count that much, or if at all. Your one vote doesn't sway an election, so they don't really pay the price for their irrationality. Pretty awesome blog post. I think he's right on the money.